For God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. This week, I want to talk about how we can use love to conquer fear. And I'm going to do it through the life of Elijah. Here we have Elijah, just got done with this big showdown with the prophets of Baal. He won. But we have the big time spokesperson for the false god Baal. Hears about what Elijah did and sends a message to him. Elijah, let the gods deal with me if by this time tomorrow you're not a dead man. She basically says, Elijah, I put this on everything. You a dead man by tomorrow. So out of fear, Elijah runs. Out of fear, Elijah gets out of place. He runs and he ends up going to the mountain of God, which is the same place Moses was when he got to see the backside of God's glory. So at this mountain, God asked Elijah, what are you doing here? He actually asks him twice, Elijah, what are you doing here? And anytime God is asking a question, it's not that he doesn't know. Adam, where are you? Where are you? It's so that you can, one of the reasons so that you can dig deeper for self-evaluation. Adam, where are you? Because Adam and Eve weren't where they were supposed to be. Elijah, what are you doing here? For one, Elijah was not supposed to be there. Elijah was supposed to be back in the city where God told him to be. Elijah ran in fear. And he's coming to God. He's coming to God's presence so he can let God know of the situation. Let God know of this fear. And that's what we're supposed to do. If you're fearful of something, you're supposed to go to God and let him know what it is that's going on in your life. But here we have Elijah out of place. So not only did he, see, for us, it's just turning to God if we have a fear. But for him, he got out of place because he went from one point to another point, one destination to another. And at this cave, at this mountain, God's asking Elijah, what are you doing here? And Elijah lets God know, God, I'm zealous for you. I've been on fire for you. I've been doing this for you. And the children of Israel, they're not turning back to you. They're tearing down your altars and they're killing off the prophets. And now they're trying to kill me too. So Elijah ran in fear because of what's going to happen, what he felt was going to happen to him because of what he was doing. But what he was doing is what God called him to do. So in 1 John chapter 4, it says, there is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear, because fear has to do with punishment. And when I read that, and I was thinking about the situation, when Elijah first heard of the threat, his initial reaction was fear for his life in response to what he did with the prophets of Baal. But according to 1 John 4, perfect love drives out fear. So instead of being fearful of that threat, his outlook, his perspective, his focus should have been on God's love instead of the threat. Because here you have the threat. The threat's right here. It's a real threat. But at the end of the day, God's love is greater than the threat. Elijah should have been focusing on God's love, realizing, hold on, I hear you threatening me, but God loves me. And God told me to do those things. So because he told me to do them, I know he loves me. I know he's in control. So I know that this is going to work together for the good, because this is what he called me to do. And because from that, there is a trust. It's like I trust that God is handling this situation. So yeah, I hear your threat, but I know who's on the throne. Yeah, I hear your threat, but I know that God loves me and I know he's in control. So yes, there is this threat there. And a normal person should be afraid of it, but I know that God loves me. And from knowing that, we're able to drive that fear out, push that fear out to where you're not fearful of that anymore. Why? Because your focus is on God's love instead of the situation that is a threat to you. There was a point in college where I was taking a class, and it was a religious class. I think it was world religion or something like that. And let's be honest, it was an easy A, but it was what I never expected what transpired in the class. I had never seen so many people just crying, just bawls out tears in a class because what the professor was doing, he was teaching things that was basically, if you grew up in the church, is shattering your world. Anything and everything that you believed in the Bible of the church was just being shattered left and right. And people were crying a lot of time, like throughout the majority of the class. Some people left the class, but at the end of the class, we were supposed to write a paper based off what you learned from the class or something that's related to what was taught in the class. And you're supposed to read it aloud. Not everybody had to read it aloud, but God had let me know early on, look, I want you to read your paper out loud. One of the main reasons was my first line is, first of all, I just want to say that I am a Christian. So that's literally how I started my paper. And we only had the last 2 weeks of the semester to read your paper out loud. And the class was every Tuesday and Thursday. The first Tuesday and first Thursday hit, and I'm listening to the papers that are being read out loud, and I'm like, oh, God, I don't think I want to read my paper based off what everybody is saying. You remember the stuff that was taught in the class was like goes against everything that you're taught, everything that you learned. And what's crazy is that no, I don't want to mention that. I don't want to talk bad about anybody in the class, but I got to a point I was like, God, I don't want to do it. And I'll be honest with you, there was a fear there. There was a fear there. And so the second week, the Tuesday that came, I'm supposed to read my paper aloud because this is what God told me to do. And I have my paper. It's ready. It's written. It's already been submitted. You just need to read it out loud. And people are raising their hands. Okay, I'll read. And it gets to the end of the class. I didn't do it. And the professor makes an announcement saying, okay, on Thursday, we're going to have a short class. I only want 2 people to read, and then we're going to dismiss for the semester. So he asked for volunteers. 2 people raised their hand. I'm like, okay, I guess it wasn't meant to be. But when I got home that night, it hit me. I felt so ashamed. Like, here it is. God told me to do something, and I didn't do it out of fear. But he told me to do this. So I'm out of place. I made the mistake. I didn't follow what it is that God told me to do, and I felt ashamed. But I came to God. I was like, God, I'm sorry. I should have listened to you, and I know you wanted me to read that paper, and this is why I didn't do it. Da 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 da. But then what came over me was this acceptance of God's love. Like, here, Joel, I know you made a mistake, and I know you didn't read that paper out of fear. Whatever those fears were. I understand that, and I forgive you, but you still need to read that paper. I'm like, wow, how can I read the paper if on Thursday there's only 2 people that are going to read their paper, and they already volunteered, and the professor, that's it, there's nobody else. I want you to read that paper. So I was like, okay, Thursday, we'll see what happens. So Thursday comes in. Mind you, before this, I was fearful of reading my paper. But because I had that interaction with God and I experienced God's love in that situation, because I made the mistake, because I was fearful or ashamed, whatever it is that you want to call it, but God forgave me for that and still wanted me to do what it is that he called me to do. I came into Thursday saying, if the opportunity is there, I would jump at it. The 2 people, they read their paper, and the professor stands up, he's giving his closing remarks, and then he's saying, is there anyone else that would like to read their paper? I shot out my hand. The fear was gone because of the interaction that I had with God, accepting God's love in that situation the night prior. So I read my paper out loud, and I felt accomplished. I felt like, oh, I'm back in the path that God wanted, the will that God wanted for me, right? And after I read that paper, there was 2 people in the back area that looked at me kind of like they gave this, like, I don't know, whatever the gesture was, like they were glad that I read that paper. And then it hit me that there was a reason for me to read that paper, and I was going to let my fear stop me from doing what it is that God called me to do. So when Elijah goes to God and lets him know the situation, God tells him, okay, I hear you, Elijah. I understand what's going on, but go back to where you were. So Elijah made the mistake. He ran. He's not where he's supposed to be. And he hears what Elijah did, but he tells Elijah, all right, go back to where you were. And go to whatever the point C was to anoint the next king and the 2 other people, Elisha And one of the people that he was going to that he anointed would eventually take care of Queen Jezebel, who threatened his life. But it's the fact that although Elijah was out of place, God still showed love to him. Although Elijah made the mistake, God was saying, okay, Elijah, you're not where you're supposed to be. You're supposed to be there. But I understand you did this out of fear, and I forgive you. But I need you to get back to doing what it is that you're supposed to do. So if we think about whenever a situation pops up where we are fearful or we should be afraid, you have that threat. But what I want you to focus on is God's love. And God's love will always be greater than whatever threat that is over your life. Whatever it is that you're afraid of, God's love is greater. So this week we talked about how we can use love to conquer fear. Next week I'm going to either talk about power or a sound mind. All the three. God has not given us a spirit of fear, but a power, love, and a sound mind. So power and a sound mind, I'm going to talk about how we can use that to conquer fear. I hope this blessed you. I know it's longer than my usual videos are, but considering that I haven't posted in the past 2 weeks, consider this a combination of the past 3 weeks.